Hey, hey. Hello, hello, hello. Hey, glad you guys could be here. Everybody, guys, gals, Alia. Gee, I'm glad you showed up because we're going to have a little fun show that we do. We call it Candid Frank Live, where we air out all our views here on the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at your local choice of store, whether it be iOS or Android. While you download, make sure you rate, leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also now smart TVs 2016 forward. That's where people usually say, go get your podcasts wherever you see them. We just like to be detailed. Now on Candid Frank Live, joining me as usual is Aaron William Freeland.
Hello,
And
everyone.
Aaron, I got to tell you, Aaron, it's kind of a challenge for me every time we do these shows because Aaron's the one who decides, for the most part, what we're going to talk about. My decision involves not giving us enough time to talk about everything he chooses. I'm afraid Aaron has done it again. He's come up with a good topic, and that good topic is worth drilling down on. And I want to change the name of it. You called it Thoughts. I don't like it because there's only one. There should be at least 32. Um, oh
Yeah,
boy.
I'm sure a couple folks wouldn't like that very much.
So let's just call it airing our views.
Perfect.
Okay, I mean, I love self gratification, so why don't I share that self gratification attitude with you? So, in airing our views, Aaron put together a I guess a proposal to a subject, which to me, when you first see it, says to me, "Huh? And why is that important?" So, Aaron, tell us why the Buddy Robinson score when Buddy Robinson scored a goal on the 11th of April of 2023, why that was impactful. I'll start by saying, who the hell is Buddy Robinson?
Yeah, that is at the heart of the matter here. Buddy Robinson, just so everybody knows, is a right winger. He is 31 years of age. He is 6'6" and 232 pounds. Born in Belmar, New Jersey. Now, it's interesting because he's bounced around the NHL a little bit. He started with Ottawa, then Calgary, then Anaheim, and finally last year in 2022, 2023 with Chicago. So it's getting late in the season. April
Which
11th
April is.
is very late in the season. Um, Chicago already well out of the playoffs, already dragging far behind where everybody expected them to be, was locked in a battle with the Pittsburgh Penguins, who at that point were actually still in the wild card race at that point. Now, the final score of the game was actually 5-2. But when Buddy Robinson scored, that made it 2-1 in the third period, with about 9 minutes and 38 seconds left. From there, and Andreas Athanasiou went on to score, and Tyler Johnson, before Danton Heinen scored to make it 4-2. And then finally, Mackenzie Entwistle salted it away with a goal with 23 seconds left. But that goal by Buddy Robinson set the wheels in motion, as it were, for the Penguins' 16-year playoff streak to end, because at that point they were no longer capable of making it. This meant that the Florida Panthers made the made the Stanley Cup
Instead,
playoffs as the eighth seed for the first time since 1996. Now, as a result of the Florida Panthers making the playoffs, this then ended up with them playing Boston in the first round. This is the President's winning trophy Boston Bruins, whom they defeated in 7 games. This is the biggest upset in playoffs history, bar none, just based on the strict point differential between these two teams.
largest
Um,
in history.
they then went on to defeat the Toronto Maple Leafs in 5 games And as a result of that defeat, the Maple Leafs appear to have imploded and are currently sitting with a 3-0 lead over Carolina in the semifinals. This is one of those teams who I think are not taking themselves very seriously at all, and are basically playing with house money at this point, and very potentially could be the team to take it all this year because Carolina can't seem to score against them. The Leafs got
Goal a
taken out.
game.
Yeah,
Goal a
and
game.
here's the kicker. This is the part that I really like. Even though they won that game 5-2 against the Pittsburgh Penguins, uh, they still managed to finish low enough that they won the draft lottery and now are going to be able to pick generational talent Connor Bedard. So a goal by a relatively unknown player, over 30, playing for the Chicago Blackhawks in a game in late April has led to the biggest upset in playoff history, the self-destruction and self-immolation of an organization of its own accord, and them getting the first overall pick in the NHL draft. So make of that what you will.
Yes, lowering themselves on their own petard in a very slow, tedious, and emphatic fashion. And we're referring to the Maple Leafs, who find themselves out of the playoffs. And the crux of this conversation, what I took from that when I read what you said there, what you repeated live with your voice that I read, it speaks to the the scarcity of a dependence on a lot of things to go right without one thing going right. The point being that in your little thesis here that you threw out, a player of insignificance, one that most of us don't know his name, scores a goal, contributes to a victory that empowers the Florida Panthers to make the playoffs. And now we know where the Leafs are. And because of that insignificant goal scorer, all this stuff happens, and the Leafs, to highlight, do self-destruct. It is becoming abundantly clear, Aaron. You stayed here too. You wanted to talk about the timelines, or at least the apparent timelines that are in existence right now when it comes to the Maple Leafs. The Kyle Dubas decision is something that I said back then that he was committing Harry Carey on television. You know, that statement, Dubas is not, he looks a little bit like Poindexter, when you look at him, the glasses, the big glasses, and he's a deep thinker. I don't think it was an accident that he offloaded that statement when he did, where he did, at the time he did, in spite of what his boss said not to do.
Well, you look at the entire timeline here, and to think that an entire organization decided not to proceed with retaining this individual based on uh, 72 hours after they've been evaluating him for a full year seems a little suspect. I mean, sure, he entered the season without a contract and was told that they wouldn't be negotiated an extension until later in the year, until a certain standard had been reached. Brendan Shanahan has been consistently on the record saying that he's very proud of and happy with the job that Kyle Dubas has been doing as Maple Leafs GM. Come March, after the trade deadline, after that period, really, the general manager's job is essentially done after the roster deadline in March. There's really nothing more that he can do, right? Uh, you
And
know,
and and that is when, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
no,
but
go ahead.
that is when Shanahan should have fired him or signed him.
Yep.
Exactly at that point. Because at that point, he has to make a decision. He has all the evidence he needs to determine whether this guy is his GM, because that's it. That's all he's going to do. Now, if you're going to wait to the end of the year, I guess this is not, I'm assuming this isn't Shanahan's first radio. Did he not see Did he not see the responsibility of the general manager? It's like a starting line from the moment his team loses. Oh, whether it be now, imagine if the Leafs had made it to the Stanley Cup. Let's say they won the Stanley Cup. We're talking another week or two closer to all that responsibility. What Shanahan did was stupid. It was a brain cramp of all brain cramps, the kind we expect back in the Harold Ballard days of the Toronto Maple Leafs, where nonsensical decisions are made. To the other point that we talked about off air, we started to talk about is about you referred to the Leafs. I'm looking here, self-destructing. Can't argue with that at all. The point being, they didn't need to self-destruct. No team needs to self-destruct. And when we talk about self-destruct, we watch all those, spy movies, all those TV shows. When self-destruction happens, something blows up and it's flattened. There is no way. I made a joke with you about the Maple Leafs back in the day when you were a young lad, probably, the gleam in your father's eye. I already knew what was wrong with the Maple Leafs back then when Ballard was running the team. The problem was they didn't build a franchise. They started from scratch. And I joked that for those of you that like watch home improvement shows, it's like walking into someone's foyer, right? And as a person, a designer. And as a designer, you look at the foyer, go, nope, don't like this foyer. Let's tear the house right down without looking at what else is salvageable, just jumping to the conclusion, we got to start over here. Now, that's great if you're working and you're getting paid to do that. But the people who live in that house, who care about that house, they don't want to suffer through unnecessary noise, unnecessary this is taken away out of the house because it's got to be rebuilt. They all want it done as quickly as possible, as best as possibly, which requires a little bit of thinking, a little less destruction. So now the Leafs have reverted to that kind of thinking, the kind that Harold Ballard had. He wants to hear a guy, and I've done this, now I want to hear something different. And this is what's wrong with the Leafs, and I'm afraid it's going to take lightning in a bottle by Shanahan to keep this team as good as they've been over the past few years under Kyle Dubas. And I've said this before and I repeat, he made a lot of bad decisions at the beginning, in my opinion. And the one that I disliked the most was how much he was paying the young guys. Unproven talent. Not to suggest they weren't going to be good, but they were unproven. And he overpaid them. And the Leafs have been paying the price ever since. But here's the thing. He made a mistake and he learned from it. And now we, as Toronto hockey fans, you as a Leaf fan, we can benefit from having a really good team in our community because this guy made mistakes and now he can pay us back by proving he learned from those mistakes and be a better general manager than most other general managers can be. The Leafs are jettisoning him once he's ready to be a better general manager.
And here's the other thing that I'd like to pick up on from here. During that press conference where Kyle overextended himself a little bit by going against Brendan Shanahan's wishes by speaking in public, he did mention that nothing was off the table. They would be open to the possibility of moving one of the core four. Now, here's where it starts to get interesting. On the Wednesday, when his agent submitted a new contract proposal, included in that contract proposal, according to Chris Johnston and James Myrtle of The Athletic, was more control for Kyle Dubas because Brendan Shanahan had vetoed transactions of his that could have potentially improved the team in the past.
His eyes.
In his eyes.
Which is fair.
That's part of the president's purview, but at the same time, I can see how Kyle might have felt that his toes were being stepped on. And he was maybe not being necessarily respected as much as he potentially could have been. Now, at that point, after the new contract was received, and between then and the announcement of Dubas being fired, Brendan Shanahan called every single member of the core four and reassured them that they would still be together in some capacity. Now, this, if I were Kyle Dubas, I wouldn't be able to stay on at that point. If I say nothing is off the table, and then my president goes and tells these guys, no, you're going to be together next year, that hamstrings me. I cannot
Well,
make any
not
moves in
just
that regard.
that, Aaron. Yes, you're right. It hamstrings him, but it also hamstrings the organization, no matter who takes over, because we all know that they need to make a change that, basically says what we've done till now isn't good enough. Keeping them all together says, or at least leaves with them, that it is good enough. So now one wonders, and this has been the disease of the Maple Leafs organization beyond MLSC and beyond TSN Bell. It is, there was the situation with the Muskoka Five, right? There were the five Leafs that all said, no, we refuse to be traded. At the top, Matt Sundin, where we refused to be traded. They weren't playing well. They weren't happy. That was clear. Their game was showing that they weren't happy. McCabe was in that group as well. And what happens is the organization, the lower part of the organization, which is the general manager, eh, you know, and the coach, that group of guys who are the closest to the team, they're in the locker room, they're watching them play every day, they're watching them practice. They think there should be a change, that management that only talks, that really understands conversations, to maintain the peace in the locker room and or with their stars, they defend the stars. So what does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean if your boss, if your immediate supervisor, if you're, put yourself in a position, folks, you're given a job, and you're, whatever that job is, it's your decision to make the unit, the people in your unit, whether it be 1,000, a million, or five, to make them do a better job. And while you're doing your job and you're sitting there and you're doing your job and something becomes obvious to you, you see a change you need to make. And then you go to make that change, and your boss above you speaks to your employees, the people that work for you, and they say, well, we don't like that idea. The big boss says to the middle management guy, right, or gal, says, no, we're not doing that. And then things blow up. And now you're standing in your office or sitting in your office watching the production line, and you're watching the same mistake happen again that you were trying to correct. You grab your coffee mug and you throw it against the wall. Am I describing a moment, maybe, that Kyle Dubas had? That part of the reason why he was so angry in the playoffs, and it seemed that he was, in a way that we hadn't seen him, he seemed a lot more composed over the years. This year, the pressure of the team losing got to him in a way that we've never seen. And, we've seen other GMs do that kind of thing, but we haven't seen it here in Toronto, which gives it a whole different perspective. And
Oh,
I
for
think
sure.
that shows that there was a frustration beyond, I think, what was going on the ice. And if you look at the coach during the series, we've talked about the way the league clearly did not want the Leafs to win. The referees made calls and didn't make calls, made calls that weren't really ones that were penalties or whatever, and then didn't make calls that were obvious penalties. And you looked at the coach and the way the coach looked. Did you not see in that series where eventually Keefe just went again and just, I can't say anything, because every time we complain that we're being mistreated, we're going to go deeper in a hole. How does that impact the GM? And we
Mm.
talk about Leaf fans, Aaron. How do you think the GM felt watching his team have to put up with that? How do you think he felt? I think he got really angry. And I think he self-destructed because he knew he wasn't going to win in Toronto. It's almost impossible. And the proof to me is that guy who is that smart doing something as odd as what he did, to literally say, I don't know if I'm going to be the GM. And if I am, I'm going to probably need some time to gather my thoughts. Come on, Aaron. If you're a boss and you hear that, right? Come on. Any boss. Can you imagine any boss hearing from their employee, I'm really not sure I want to be here? Where's that going
Well,
to send you?
he he
He's not a
he did
dummy.
he did say, now this season has been tough on me, and
That's
I
not the
would
point,
and
though.
I and I would prefer to come back as the GM. if I were to not come back as the GM, I would probably take some time off to think about my options and work things through with my family. He needed 24 to 48 to 72 hours to sit down with the family, make sure he had their support for a decision like this.
I
Very
agree with
obviously,
you, Aaron, but he shouldn't have done that in
no,
public.
no,
That's
he
what I'm
really shouldn't
saying.
have.
The fact that he did it in public was he was making a statement to Shanahan, MLSC, his team, his players, everybody in the Maple Leaf organization. He said that to out loud. The secrets that, the conversations, I don't think his conversation in public was any different than it was in private. It might have been more scathing in private. In other words, when he spoke to Spezza directly, it wouldn't have been as nice as what we heard there, as controlled. It would have been a little more with Keefe. What do you think he said to Keefe? In his exit interviews, or talking to Keefe, and the conversations they had. That anger he had that seemed to be building up through the playoffs. He's having a conversation with Keefe, and Keefe is saying, "Well, what are we going to do about these penalties? How do we defend ourselves against this?" Well, I'll go talk to Shanahan and see if we have the power to say, "Look, we're being mistreated. What's going on here?" I've maintained this for the past few years, that the biggest problem Dubas has had to deal with is officiating. The way the team's players get suspended, the way other teams' players don't get suspended when they're playing them, and all these calls. And finally, the the experts said the series changed in game 2 when Tampa tied the score 2-2. That was the play where 3 penalties weren't called. Obvious, obvious, called every time. You can't kick a guy's feet out from under him with your skate. You can't hook a guy. You can't give a guy a can opener, and you can't interfere with him. They did all those things on that goal, and no penalties were called. The game got tied. The game ended with Florida had 2-0. Big change in the series. And I think that's what led to his frustration. And I know that's what made Keefe do the
Well, it is unfortunately what it is, and this trend is continuing in the Florida Carolina series as well. So there's a trend here. There is a team that's getting a push, and they're not being very delicate about shielding their viewing public from knowing that they're giving a team a push. And when you get down to the wire, and you're in the last 30 seconds of a game, those penalty calls that are missed can be the difference between a tie and an outright win. So
and
there you
and
have
and
it.
that and you know what? And you know what? Um, if you're a hockey fan, and if you're someone who understands rules, and if
Yep.
you don't, even if you're not, you don't have to be a Leaf fan. If just people who are really truly unbiased ask themselves a question, like I said, it is what it is, and you can't do anything about it.
Yep.
Well, Aaron, this was fun. And eventually we'll stop talking about the poor officiating, but as long as it continues, it's going to be a matter of subject. There's just no way around it.
Yep. There is no way around it, unfortunately. But that I think takes us right up to the finish line.
Yes, it does. Aaron, thanks for doing this, and
Thanks,
thanks for
Frank.
that great idea of a conversation.
Always.
All right, for Aaron William Freeland, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching Candid Frank Live, Aaron, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6 p.m. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For Candid Frank Live, other news, entertainment, and sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget Candid Frank Stanisci, 10:30 on YouTube. Subscribe. Talk to you later.